our last topic, we saw that we wanted to help our physical and spiritual children learn to explain the way that Abram grew in his faith as he learned to walk with God. In this way, we also help them to learn to walk by faith in their own lives. In this topic, we will see that Lot moved to the city of Sodom and was taken captive when the city was conquered. In Genesis 14, verse 1 through 4, we read, "And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elazar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, that they made war with Barak, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shember, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is, Zoar. All these joined together in the valley of Siddim, that is, the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer. In the 13th year they rebelled. The land called Shinar means country of two rivers. In the original name by which Babylon was called, Ellasar was a city-state in the region of Babylon, about 29 miles east of the city of Ur of the Chaldeans. The land called Elam was an area east of Babylon and northeast of the lower Tigris River. We see that the fourth kingdom was given the title to an area known as the nations. The word translated nations is used 558 times in the Old Testament and is translated by the words nations, heathen, Gentiles, and people. The first uses are in Genesis 10. In Genesis 10 verse 5 we read, "From these the coastland peoples of the Gentiles were separated into their lands, everyone according to his language, according to their families, into their nations." It is used twice in the same verse. The first time is translated Gentiles, and the second time nations. In Genesis 10 verse 31 through 32 we read, "These were the sons of Shem, according to their families, according to their languages, and their lands, according to their nations. These were the families of the sons of Noah, according to their generations, in their nations, and from their nations they were divided on the earth after the flood." In these verses, it is translated nations all three times. As a result, they are uncertain of the exact area of the fourth nation referred to by this word. The 5 cities they conquered were all in the lower Jordan Valley. This is the area where the Dead Sea is now located. Many people think that the Valley of Siddim was the large point that sticks out of the Dead Sea onto the east side, that it may have been connected all the way across, so the Dead Sea was smaller at that time. These 5 cities were united together by the need to protect themselves from the nations to the east. However, when these nations conquered them, it meant that they were forced to pay taxes, or tribute, to these nations from the east. They paid these taxes for 12 years. Then in the 13th year they decided to rebel against Chedorlaomer, and did not send tribute money to Chedorlaomer and the other kings. That resulted in Chedorlaomer and the kings coming to invade that area with a large army the next year. Genesis 14 verse 5 through 7 says, "In the 14th year Chedorlaomer and all the kings that were with him came and attacked Rephaim in Ashtoreth, Karnaim, the Zuzim in Ham, and Emim in Shava, Kirathim, and the Horites in their mountains of Seir, as far as El Paran, which is by the wilderness. Then they came back and turned to En-Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and attacked all the countries of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites who dwelt in the Hazion Tamar. These armies from the east started their attacks against some of the other cities in Canaan before coming to the area of the Dead Sea. The word translated Rephaim means giants. This word is used in 2 Samuel to speak of the sons of Goliath, as well as in other places. In fact, the word is used a total of 25 times in various places, mostly in the area of the Philistines along the Mediterranean Sea. The armies of the east began their attacks in Ashtoreth Karnaim, which means the city of Ashtoreth between 2 mountain peaks. This area was on the east side of Jordan because the area of Bashan near the Sea of Galilee. The location of Ham, which means hot or sunburned, was probably also on the east side of the Jordan River, but the location is not definitively known. The people living in that area were known as Zuzim. Shava Kiritim means the plain of two cities, and these cities were where the people of Emim lived. The word Horites means the people who lived in caves. They lived on Mount Seir, west of the cities of the Jordan Valley. This later became the area of Edom, where the descendants of Esau later lived. Chedorlaomer and his armies continued on south to El Paran, which is near the Gulf of Aqaba on the Red Sea and nearly 100 miles south of the Jordan Valley. Then they came back north and attacked En-Mishpat, Kadesh, and the whole surrounding area. They also attacked the city of Hazazon Tamar, where the Amorites were located. The city was north and west of the cities in the lower Jordan Valley. However, the 5 cities in the lower Jordan Valley realized that these armies of the east were attacking all the nearby areas, so there was no hope for the 5 cities when the armies of the east began to attack them. As a result, the 5 cities of the lower Jordan Valley gathered their armies together and went out to fight against these armies from the east. Genesis 14 verse 8 through 12 says, "And the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela," this is Zoar, "went and joined together in the battle in the valley of Siddim against Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of nations, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elazar, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was full of asphalt pits, and the king of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. Some fell there, and the remainder fled to the mountains. Then they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went their way. They also took Lot, Abram's brother's son, in Sodom, and his goods, and departed." Here we see that the 5 kings of the cities in the lower Jordan Valley met the armies of the east under the command of Chedorlaomer at the valley of Siddim, where they went out to fight to protect their cities. We said earlier in this topic that the Valley of Siddim was probably where the land sticks out of the Dead Sea on the east side, and it may have gone all the way to the western shore, so the Dead Sea was not as large at the time. That would have meant that the area south of the peninsula was a part of the lower Jordan Valley and the Valley of Siddim. We read that the Valley of Siddim was full of asphalt pits, tar pits. The material in these pits could be used to seal things. In the other 2 places where this word is used, we read in Genesis 11 verse 3, "Then they said to one another, 'Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly.' They had bricks for stone, and they had asphalt for mortar." Here we see that the word is used for the mortar that held the bricks together on the Tower of Babel. Then Exodus 2 verse 3 says, "But when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes for him, daubed it with asphalt and pitch, put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds of the river's bank." This speaks of the ark in which Moses was placed as a baby. The material from these pits could be used for both bricks to stick things together and to waterproof the ark in which Moses was placed. When the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, all the men scattered. Some were killed in the valley, or others fell in asphalt pits, while the rest fled to the mountains. As a result, it was no problem for the kings of the east to capture the cities, because their fighting men were either killed or had gone into hiding. We see that the armies of the east took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah. The word translated goods meant anything of value, including gold, silver, possessions, animal, and anything else that had value. The word translated provisions meant any kind of food supplies that they found in the cities. As a result, nothing of value was left in these cities. This word is used several times in Genesis chapters 41 through 47 to speak of the food in the land of Egypt that Joseph gathered during the 7 years of plenty, so that there was food in the years of famine. We also see that they took Lot, who was living in the city of Sodom. We said in an earlier topic that Abram walked by faith while Lot walked by sight. Now we see the first consequence of that choice. Notice the choice of Lot. Genesis 13 verse 10 through 11 says, "And Lot lifted his eyes and saw all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt as you go toward Zoar. Then Lot chose for himself all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east. And they separated from each other. Lot made his first choice by what he saw." Genesis 13 verse 12 through 13 says, Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plains and pitched his tent as far as Sodom. But the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. Here we see that the second choice that Lot made, he moved into the middle of the plain where the 5 cities were located and pitched his tent near Sodom. Then here in Genesis 14 verse 12 we read, "They also took Lot, Abram's brother, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed." Here we see the third choice of Lot. He had moved out of his tent and was now living in the city of Sodom, even though the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful. These continuing choices are going to cost Lot everything he had over the coming years. Here we see that Lot and all his goods were taken by the armies of the east when they captured the city of Sodom. As a result, Lot, his family, and all his goods were taken captive by the armies of the east. They were on their way to live lives of slavery and had temporarily lost everything. Here we see an example of some consequences of wrong choices. However, we see the consequences got much worse for Lot and his family. 2 Corinthians 5 verse 7 through 8 says, "For we walk by faith, not by sight. We are confident, yes, well pleased rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord." We want to help our physical and spiritual children and learn to explain how the life of Lot shows the consequences of sin are the result of choosing to walk by sight instead of walking by faith. May the Lord richly bless you as you help your children learn to explain why it's important to walk by faith.